Mr. Fraser, how long have you been with the Department of the Taoiseach?
I suppose about 23 years.
In the same department?
In the Department of the Taoiseach, Chairman?
Yeah.
Yeah, 23 years.
23 years. So it's fair to say that you're an experienced civil servant and would know extensively about how the civil service operates, its faults, its failures, and its the positive side to it, which is must be considered too. So you have broad knowledge of it. So can I ask you then, you're referred to as the Secretary General of the Department of the Taoiseach, and then in correspondence I often see it stated that you are Secretary to the Government. So as Secretary to Government, what does that entail?
So I hold both roles, Chairman.
Yeah.
That hasn't always been the case, but I carry out both roles, and I mean, I'm only one person, so it's not as if I'm split down the middle, but the role of Secretary to the Government is, I suppose, as the title suggests. So its main role is to look after the business of government, so the agendas for cabinet meetings, the arrangements for cabinet meetings, the promulgation of decisions, and if you like, the constitutional aspect of the job, if I may describe it, that's so relations with the Oireachtas, as you may know, and the accounting officer for Oireachtas Nuclear, but I also am involved with relations with the Oireachtas, obviously transmitting bills that are passed by the Houses to the President, constitutional business, the formation of government, the appointments of the Taoiseach, the appointment of judges, all of that constitutional aspect of the constitutional workings of the state from the government point of view, obviously not Parliament or the Presidency or the Judiciary, and relations with the arms of government. So it's that, if you like, the essential business of government in the constitutional sense. Probably the best way to describe that bit of the job.
What's your interaction in that role with other Secretaries General?
So my interaction with other Secretaries General is not, it's not in that role or in another role. My interaction in practical terms is every week I meet with the Secretaries General to brief them on the decisions made by the Cabinet. I chair the Civil Service Management Board once a month, and I obviously then have to do what my job entails, which is, you know, well known, Chairman, is trying to pull things together and organise things and coordinate things and do whatever.
Yeah, so you'd have regular meetings with the Secretaries General then?
I would, yeah, absolutely.
And at any stage during those meetings was this issue raised?
Which issues, Chairman, precisely?
The issue that we're discussing today, which is the secondment, was it ever raised at the meeting?
At a meeting of all the Secretaries General?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. I just want to put things in context here. So there is a significance then in what Mr. Watt points out here, that the Secretary to the Government was told certain things. He comments on it in his report.
Well,
so can I go back then again to the circular which was spoken about here? So the circular was issued on the 23rd of December 2021. So it's not an old document. It's a recent circular that was sent out, and that would have been sent to every Secretary General.
I would have thought so, yeah.
Yeah. So in that, just for the information of the members here, there's three things. All secondment will be temporary in nature. All secondment advertisements will be sent to the Civil Service HR Division. And in general, an advertised position should be circulated to all staff. So it's pretty clear on the steps that you have to take. Now, If you move then to the letter of the 16th of March to Professor Linda Doyle, it's a public document, I presume I can refer to it. In that proposal, which sets out the agreement to secondment of Dr. Tony Holohan, the letter of intent, it refers in the second paragraph, I recognise that agreement is conditional on the approval of any necessary authority within the university. Now, I'm not asking you to comment on this, Mr. Fraser. I'm setting a scene here as to where all this started. So, the authority mentioned here is only the university. And the superannuation arrangements in alignment with contractual terms and conditions relating to the position of CMO is addressed by the Department of Health, is what it says here. But then it goes on in that letter of intent to state clearly under the proposed agreement what the Department of Health commits to. So it actually commits to the secondment, the continue to pay the salary at its existing level, salary terms and conditions equivalent to the position on the date of signing of the agreement, improvements, awards regarding that may apply to the position of CMO over the duration of the secondment. It commits to making an annual ring-fenced allocation of €2 million for the duration of the secondment to be administered through the Health Research Board, a body under the aegis of the Department of Health. And it goes on then to talk about funds to provide Dr. Holohan's salary until his retirement. It asks the Trinity College would provide an office on the campus. And it also says provides administrative support for the position. That's what was stated on the 16th of March 22. And all of that is what has brought us to this juncture, to this examination. So let's be clear about this, that it was advanced to a stage where the final document was to be signed at the end of March. Appointment and officer of the Department of Health to work on the details such that a final agreement is signed prior to the 31st of March 22. So all of this was advanced apparently without any sanction from anyone except the Secretary-General, and it flies in the face of the Circular 27/2021. That's the backdrop to this. Now, questions have been asked about the remit of committees. Well, if Circular 27/2021 does not define the involvement and role of this committee, clearly it does. Now, I'm saying that because I'm moving now to the recent happenings, because in the public arena we have been fed a diet of smoke and mirrors, obfuscation, spin, and a determined effort by government to cloud the issues here. So the issues are clear. They're set out on the 16th of March. They're set out in the document of the 21st of December. And it's quite clear that there is an issue here that should be dealt with by this committee. So on the 12th of April 22, the Secretaries-General were asked for information They were told about the invitation, and on the 13th of April 22, ministers were informed, and it was said to them that it may be that they would have to appear depending on what the 3 Secretaries General would have to say, you being one of them, Deeper being another, and there's an apology there. The Secretary General is not available, and that's fine. And then there is Mr. Watt. There were the 3. We asked then for information, just to inform the committee, to put us into a position where we clearly understood what was going on, our role within what was going on, and our oversight role as a committee. And to say that some showed utter contempt for what was going on, I think is an understatement. Deadlines were not met. Information was not given. Requests for further information were not acknowledged. Telephone calls from the Secretariat here were not returned. And I think that shows a most awful example to those at a junior level within the civil service, where they should be seeing exemplary conduct from the Secretaries General. I then want to turn to the political situation and comments that were made before I go back to Mr. Watt's letter of last night at 8 o'clock. It's regrettable that the Taoiseach used the words witch hunt, because this committee, and I'm sure it's the same for every other committee in the House, is about its business. It's about accountability, transparency, bringing before the committees the various witnesses depending on the subject matter, and pursuing it in a constructive, courteous fashion, but getting to the truth of the matter. And it would seem that there is no appetite in government to get to the truth of this matter. Now, it's being suggested by the Taoiseach that we should wait until the independent report is completed, due process, and then we'll get the report and discuss it. That stands in stark contrast to the treatment of a minister who asked for due process but was sacked. And if that's not double standards, I don't know what is. So therefore, the committee has a remit. It has to answer the questions from the public in the context of the belief that is out there that there's a senior cabal of politicians and civil servants that are ignoring due process, ignoring the Oireachtas committees, and just doing as they please. The letter of last night from Mr. Watt to the committee. As usual, it gives a lot of packing. There's a lot of stuff in there, some irrelevant. And he says that he answered questions on these matters at the Health Committee, and I do not believe it is reasonable for me to be asked to attend a different sectoral committee to answer questions on the same issues. He's not being asked to answer questions on the same issues. He's being asked to address the issues that are of public interest and of concern to the people of Ireland. He's being asked by a parliamentary committee taking its task responsibly, and he's been asked to appear before to clarify matters. And as I said, the circular letter puts him right in the frame to be asked to attend this meeting. So that answers that part of his letter. And this is not personal. I just have to do my job as chairman. And it's being made seriously difficult by the attitude of government ministers, the Taoiseach and senior civil servants. He states here, I understand it has been practiced for some time now that one committee should look at each particular issue under the terms of reference, rather than duplicate examinations of issues. I'm sure you will agree that this is neither in the public interest nor is it an efficient use of members' or public servants' time. Well, I put it to you, Mr. Fraser, that he has eaten up a huge amount of time of this committee, and indeed the clerk and the people that serve this committee, by not answering letters, by not giving information, by having everyone here to go chasing after the information, not be responded to, and the numerous telephone calls that were not returned. There is no dispute between the Health Committee and the Finance Committee. There's a clear line of responsibility for both committees. And I would suggest, as I've said earlier, all of it is contained not only in that circular, but in the title of the committee, the Department of Taoiseach, Public Expenditure and Reform. And if ever we needed to look at the public expenditure in this case, and reform, by God, we need to do it now. I would also say to you that in the public domain, you cannot go anywhere publicly without someone saying to you as a politician the disgraceful behaviour of some politicians and some civil servants. In fact, I wonder, did this attitude give rise to the fact that those in the HSE who wanted to meet, or who Minister Rabbitte wanted to meet, decided, no, we're not going to meet you? Mr. Watt goes on to say that in carrying out her duties, it should be done in a respectful and courteous manner. He goes on to say that issues arise in a professional, factual and policy-focused manner without unnecessary and distracting personal commentary. None of this is distracting commentary. None of this is personal. And none of this is outside the realms of being courteous to everyone. And I find it a shocking state of affairs that this committee has to sit like this and work its way through nonsense and through all of the misinformation and spin in order to try to get to the truth. Now, I go back then to the the report from Mr. Watt to the Taoiseach. And I hope the Taoiseach and his officials will ponder on what's being said in this committee. Point number 20 in his submission, he says that this involved the Secretary to the Government and myself as Secretary of the Department of Health. He goes on further to state that implicates you, Mr. Fraser. He goes on then to say that the CMO has an outstanding record of public service on behalf of the Irish state, and both the Secretary to Government and I indicated our strong support to facilitate and help where possible. Again, he refers to you as Secretary to the Government. He goes on then to say in early March, the Secretary to the Government spoke to me and I confirmed that I was working on the details of the assignment, including the proposed research funding element. I was aware that the Government had recently endorsed open-ended secondment arrangements. Now, circular from the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, which again I refer to, has other things to say about that. He then commits the research board with details to be agreed between all three parties. It was never envisaged that the salary would be paid directly on the vote of the Department of Health, but yet it's being paid, it would be seem to be paid from an agency under the remit of the Department of Health. If you go down to 43, point 43, Mr. Watt says that the Act of 1997, which stipulates that the administration of the government departments is a matter for Secretaries General. I don't dispute that. But he's not a Lone Ranger. He's a manager within a system that is accountable to the people through the Oireachtas committees, and should be accountable to the government if the government is interested at all, particularly given the sums of money involved. It has been suggested, Mr Watt says in 44, that the Taoiseach and other members of the government were kept in the dark. He then goes on to say that the Secretary of the Government, to the Government, was aware of the proposed secondment move, not necessarily the details, but was aware of it. And I understood that the fact of discussions regarding the CMO's future plans were known to the Department of Taoiseach. I assumed that key decision makers were aware of the proposal, but not necessarily the precise details. In early March, the Secretary to the Government spoke to me and asked me to confirm that I was working on the details. I confirmed yes. Inferred from this that this had political support in government buildings. Everyone seems to be running a mile from that one. If we go down then to 56, he says, it's disappointing that some commentary alleges erroneously that I failed to keep the Minister appropriately informed. The Minister was informed of the proposal for Dr Hoolan to take up a professorship at TCD in advance of the announcement, and was supportive. Now, I wonder, was the advance of the announcement the night before, which seems to be his way of operating, of informing the Minister, as he did with us last night at 8 o'clock, sending us the email that he sent. So that brings me to the final point, Mr Fraser, and it's this. After all of that, the committee here was available for Mr Watt and others, ministers and so on, to come before it. It's a two-way street here. You get a chance to clarify your position. You get a chance to put the facts before the general public, because it's a public meeting. And we all get a chance to learn from the mistakes, because nobody gets it right. None of us get it right all of the time. So we're now faced with the investigation, which the terms of reference refer to as learnings from this. It's been a debacle from start to finish. It has cast a shadow on Tony Hoolan, whom I have the greatest respect for. And even the commentary over the last few days in the Dáil has been nothing short of an attempt to cloud the issue, which I said earlier. And I truly find it shocking that senior politicians and senior civil servants don't see beyond the position they're currently holding on this and understand that the public is furious over what's going on. Not so much with Dr Hoolan, but with the carry-on of ministers, their comments, of senior civil servants, their comments, and particularly the misleading commentary put to the Dáil by the Taoiseach when he says a witch hunt, when he refers to 3 committees taking it up, when he refers to what should or should not happen. I think I've made the point that it's this committee, certainly in relation to the remit it has, should be involved in this. So I would ask publicly for Mr Watt to reconsider his position in terms of his attendance here. I would ask the ministers, all of them, Taoiseach and 2 ministers involved, to consider their position in terms of attending here and giving clarity, not to me, but to the committee, as a committee of Parliament, as representatives of the public. And I would ask that that be done sooner rather than later. Now, if there's any point, Mr Fraser, that you wish to clarify, please do so now, if you wish to clarify any point. And I want to acknowledge that this is not the first time that you've come before this committee when others wouldn't. And I respect you for that. And it's a pity that others would take from your example. And attend the committees when they're asked to do so. Mr. Fraser, if you have anything to say.
No,
Speak now
thank
or
you for
forever be
noting
silent.
that, Chairman. I don't really have anything else to say.
Okay. So you're off
Well,
on your ambassador role now to the UK. I wish you well in that. I would have hoped that civil service would have been left behind, well reformed and well tuned to attending committees. But maybe we've a little bit more work to do on that. But as I say, I recognise your input into this, and I'll leave it at that.